Hello SEO lovers, this is Kate Toon from the Recipe for SEO Success, and it's a very windy day here in my little Toon cave in my back garden, so I apologise for the bangs and noises. But today we are talking all about WordPress SEO, and my guest on the show today is Peter Mead. Peter Mead is a Melbourne-based WordPress SEO specialist with a passion for all things digital. He is a regular speaker at events, including the Melbourne SEO Meetup. And you can find more about Peter on my website, www.therecipeforseosuccess.com.au. Today, we're going to give you some useful WordPress tips, from plugins to advice to essentials before you go live, as well as common mistakes lots of WordPress website owners make. So let's get stuck in. Hello, Peter. Thank you so much for being here today on the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah, great to be on your show, and
Cool.
Thanks for asking me.
No worries. So I just did a little bit of a bio about you there, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get stuck in?
Well, I call myself a WordPress SEO specialist. I started in IT back in 1997. That was before Google. So, yeah, quite interesting times. And just over time, just became really fascinated with the internet and the technology behind it. And yeah, so I've just really been about 2005, I got into WordPress. That was one of the very early versions. That's where my passion has gone.
It's funny, for us people who've been in digital for a long time, I, like you, started out in 1997, and email didn't properly exist then. I remember those were the days when if you wanted to pass a memo around the office, you put it in an envelope and people signed their name on the front of the envelope when they had read the memo. That's how old school we are, people, and how times have changed. So talking of change, what I like to do at the beginning of each show is talk about something that has happened this week in the world of Google. And there's been a big change this week, hasn't there? A bit of a horrible one that people are a bit fed up about, which is Google messing around with the AdWords tool again. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I guess it's their tool. They own it, and they can
do what they want.
Changes they like. Yeah, so I guess the basics of what's happened is, for years and years when we're doing SEO, we always do our keyword research by logging into the Google Keyword Planner. And, that's changed a fair bit over the years. Originally, it used to be unfettered access to the tool, and then they've slowly been locking it down over the years. But now I guess they're sort of making a statement to people who don't pay for advertising that you're not really welcome to use the tool.
I think the thing is that, I don't think they've actually defined what the budget is that you need to be paying before you start getting data. And in all honesty, I reckon most companies should definitely give a little bit of Google AdWords a pop. I think you can get some great insights for your SEO campaigns, and and also there are plenty of other tools out there. I mean, I'm a big fan of SEMrush, and they use slightly different ways of getting their data. There's the keyword tool IO, Moz's new keyword planner tool. So, I think if you were purely relying on Google AdWords data anyway, there was probably, as an SEO, that's not not the only rabbit in my bag. Is that even an expression?
No, there's plenty of tools for doing keyword research. And yeah, you really do need to be using multiple ways of checking on your keyword data. SEMrush, it's a great tool. Been in love with that for years, and they just keep improving. You sort of need to research from multiple perspectives, and sometimes, even those tools, even the good tools, the data you get, it's still only a guide. And
I so agree. I mean, I advocate on my course that really one of the best ways to find out good, long tail conversational keywords is to listen to your customers, because they're asking you the questions that you need to be answering anyway. Before we get stuck into the topic, let me explain a little bit about what WordPress is, if you're not familiar with it. So WordPress is a super popular content management platform, content management system, or CMS. We all know that techies love their acronyms, but CMS just means content management system. It just allows you to manage your content, basically. It's very popular. It's used by a lot of big brands in the world. I read some stat that something like 20% of the sites in the world are on the internet are built with WordPress. There are two options. You can have a self-hosted version or a version hosted on the WordPress platform. Totally recommend going for the self-hosted version. And it's kind of popular with SEO types, I guess, because a lot of SEO-ness, a lot of things we want to achieve are kind of sort of built into the platform. And if they're not, there's a lot of fantastic plugins that you can get that are going to make your life easier. It's not that WordPress comes ready SEO'd, that's not true at all. But there are just lots of different ways and techniques that make WordPress easier to make SEO friendly than, say, Wix or some of the other platforms out there. So do you agree, Peter? Do you think, obviously you're a huge WordPress fan. Why do you like it so much?
It's a brilliant platform, and it's just so consumer friendly, if that's the right word to use. I think it started on the right footings. I mean, I sort of, I've been passionate about technology for a long time, and when I discovered WordPress, it started on an open source project, and Matt Mullenweg, he took over a different open source project and really made it into something good. Look, I've met Matt Mullenweg. We had a chat, and his whole idea of democratizing publishing. So I think they've got the right ethos. The company who, the Automatic, the company who is behind WordPress, they've just really, they believe in what they're doing, and Matt Mullenweg, the founder, he really believes in it. I think that with that's the right ingredient to make sure you've got an awesome tool, an awesome CMS.
Just to clarify for people who aren't clear, open source means that anybody can develop for WordPress. So it means that anybody can make a plugin, anybody can, make add-ons for that platform. They're not keeping it secret and hidden and not letting anybody look at the code and how it works. That's right, isn't it, Peter?
Absolutely. Open source, it means you can take that software, and if you're capable of developing plugins or themes, or you can take that and do what you want with it, and there's sort of no restrictions on what you do with that code.
And I think that's one of the beauties of the platform, because other platforms, and I'm don't want to pick on Wix, but let's pick on Wix for a minute. They're not open source, so it means the only people who are developing stuff for that platform are the Wix people. Whereas with WordPress, there are millions of plugins, there are gazillions of themes. Literally anything you probably want to do with your site. You want to have a widget pop up and say hello and then move to the side, and you want a map to fly across the page. There's probably a plugin out there to do it. Probably somebody has developed that. And that's why I love WordPress, because there's so many people contributing towards it. Somebody has started using a chainsaw in the background, which always happens when I start doing a video. So I hope that's not interfering too much. I hope you can still hear me. But hey, talking about plugins, now that one plugin that everybody has heard in when it comes to WordPress and SEO is Yoast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Yoast, Peter, and what it does and why you like it?
Yoast is developed by a guy named Yoast. There's a sort of a funny thing going on there with his name and the plugin, but it's a long time plugin. It's been around for quite a few years now. The guy who's developed it, he's big in the SEO community as well, and so I think to me it's just another reason why it's such a good plugin, because he really gets behind what he does and believes in what he understands what needs to be done, but it just makes things so simple, and it's logical to use. It's easy to install, and you can just follow the traffic lights, so to speak, and kind of get a result. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but just, you know, sort of out of the box with a little bit of configuring, most people can get a result.
Yoast is a free plugin or a freemium plugin, so you can get the free version for nothing, and then you can upgrade. And they've got various different things that you can upgrade to. You can get a local upgrade. There's lots of different types. I personally have only ever used the free version, and it does pretty well for me. And what it does is it does things like it will set up your robot's TXT file. Now, that sounds very geeky to people, but what that does is speak to the bot and tell it what it can look at and what it can't look at. It will set up an XML sitemap for you. It will enable you to integrate with your Google Search Console. I keep calling it Google Webmaster Tools, but no, Google Search Console.
Me too.
And your analytics. But the thing it's most known for is the traffic lights, the on-page optimization. You put in your focus keyword, and then Yoast comes back and says, well, here's your score. You did well at this, but not so well at this. And lots of people get very, very hung up on that traffic light, which is why I know a lot of SEO people who don't like Yoast, because people are like, well, I didn't get a green light. My page is ruined. What's your opinion on the traffic light system?
Yeah, it is a common misconception, but it's like most things in SEO. You know, the all the numbers and all the kind of traffic lights, or, you know, all the keyword data. Everywhere you go, there's data about SEO and what you should do and shouldn't do. I think these traffic lights are just another example of, they are a guide. And, you know, if you've got a focus keyword, and if you put it in your page title and put it in the content and in the meta description, yeah, then the traffic light will go green. However, sometimes, you know, that's just not applicable depending what sort of page you're working on your WordPress website. So some pages, it maybe doesn't have a lot of content or a lot of words on that page, and it's just appropriate. So if those sort of pages, if you're not getting a green traffic light, so to speak, well, it's not really that much to worry about. But so I guess this requires you to dive more into the understanding of SEO and the understanding of the dynamics of the web page that you're working on. So sometimes, you know, you can spend a bit of time learning a bit more about, you know, what are the elements on the page that are going to make that really the SEO work for that page.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see people trying to get a green light on their contact page or their terms and conditions. And it's like, you don't need to optimize every single page of your site. And also, especially with longer phrases, you know, if you are writing a blog post that has a very long conversational style keyword, like how do I write a copy deck? It might be impossible to use that phrase as often as Yoast wants you to get the green light. So you do have to employ a degree of common sense to go, it's okay, I've used it sufficiently, I can use other phrases. So I think you made such a good point there. Like, sometimes these tools can almost be dangerous if you don't understand the bigger picture. You know, that you go through and you maybe even over optimize, or you actually keyword saturate your page. You put so many keywords in that it actually starting to sound a bit weird. We've all read those pages where it's like, I am a window cleaner in Sydney and I clean windows in Sydney. And when I'm cleaning your windows in Sydney, it's like, whoa, this has been written by a lunatic. So yes, I think that's very true. So I think piece of top tip there from Peter is to, you know, understand that not every page needs to be optimized, and also to look at the context of the page and don't get too hung up on the green light. Now, in Yoast, you can set your focus keyword, and you can, you know, edit the title tag and the meta description. If you're not sure how to write title tags, you can do my 10-day challenge where I explain how to do that. And what are some of the other things that the Yoast plugin tells you about in optimization? What other things is it looking for from your page?
It's looking for, I mean, there's things like readability in your content. To me, that's one that's important. It does the Flesh readability score. I think that's perhaps a tip for all the listeners out there, is that don't overlook the readability score, because, yeah, I think that's a really big deal. Again, it gives you a score. It does an automatic, you know, check and tries to, you know, tell you how well you've written your article.
Yeah.
But you kind of, I mean, I guess this is just pointing back to how well written content and how it really does make a big difference to your website. So that's what I'd recommend to people if they're not, if you need a bit of help learning or wanting to improve your content writing, then it's worth perhaps doing a course or spending some time improving your writing skills, because I think that really is one of the major things about your page. Yeah, so Yoast is going to check that and check all your other on-site factors, things like your alt, things like image tags and whether you've got alt attributes set, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I just think the content is really the biggest thing.
Yeah, I love the readability score. I mean, as a copywriter, that's very important, so that you are writing for humans first and Google second. Now, another plugin that's popular which does similar things is All-in-One SEO, which is actually the plugin that I use on my Toon copywriter site and have used, since I set that up 7 or 8 years ago. It's not as sort of sexy on the front end, maybe I would say, but it does the same job. But have you used that plugin? Is that one that you like as well? Yeah,
I used to use that a lot before I switched over to Yoast, and yeah, it was definitely a great plugin. That was the one I used, but at some stage made the switch over to Yoast. Yeah, but it's still a great plugin, and lots of SEO people, they swear by it.
I think if the traffic lights are driving you crazy, maybe give All-in-One SEO a go. But if you are going to switch between those two plugins, make sure that you use one of the plugins that will pull down the information from one, the titles and the metas, and upload it into the other. I'll include links to both those plugins and that kind of transitional plugin in the links on the show notes. Now, one thing we talked about, which is a bit technical, so if you are not very technical, close your ears at this bit. But when people install Yoast, obviously the straightforward thing is the on-page optimization, but you can actually go within the settings and you can change various other bits. There's lots of boxes to check and uncheck. And I know that you're a big fan of non-indexing taxonomies.
I guess it does get a bit more into the expert side of things. Yeah, but the basics of it is that within the way WordPress works, the database fields and some of the properties about a post, so to speak. So, everybody knows about tags and categories inside of their WordPress site. Well, taxonomies are kind of an extension of that, I guess, where, maybe for instance, you might have installed a plugin that does locations if you've got multiple locations. And so it's often the case that that plugin will then create things called taxonomies for those locations. And what happens is it's kind of indexable. Those taxonomies kind of end up, there's multiple ways of people finding your website through Google, and it just sort of appears in Google with some weird kind of URL, or it just doesn't look right. The reality is no one's ever going to probably find that search result, but what it's doing is just confusing Google, because the whole idea is that Google sends out these Google bots, the spiders, and crawls your website, and it's trying to index the data on your site. So if you've got these kind of multiple taxonomies, many ways of finding the same piece of content, yes, you can do a canonical, which is another way of doing it, but I think no indexing is a really good thing to do.
No indexing basically means that it won't show up in Google's index. And I think, what happens on a lot of, especially WordPress sites, is even with tags and categories, you can find that maybe you created wild amounts of tags when you first started, and now you're finding that those tags are actually forming URL strings and becoming almost pages in Google's mind. And you've just got all these odds pages coming up in the index that actually aren't pages that you want Google to be looking at, or humans to be looking at. So by no indexing those, you just clear them out. It's just clearing out all these extraneous things. I found that a lot of my media attachments were being indexed, so I know index those. It is a bit more geeky, it is a bit more technical. We also touched on canonical referencing there, which, you know, will go way over the head of a lot of people. But that's kind of telling Google that this is the page to look at. Don't look at these other ones. It is a bit complicated. If you are a beginner with SEO, it's really not something I would stress about too much. I would say, look, you know, go in, get your Yoast installed, work hard at that on-page optimization, and then, you know, once you've got your knowledge and you feel comfortable with that, have a look at some of those checkboxes, maybe do a bit of training and research, or speak to your developer about whether you need to no index any of those bits and bobs. But not something I'd be rushing to do straight away. As soon as you've set your WordPress up, you need to understand no indexing taxonomies. It's definitely a little bit further down the track. Let's quickly go through some of your other favorite plugins that you love for WordPress.
There's another one which I use, which is iThemes security. The more secure and the more you can increase the quality of your website, it does help SEO. I know it sounds, a lot of people maybe don't equate that with SEO, but definitely, you know, you sort of lock down your site, and yeah, it can have benefits as well.
I love Backup Buddy. I know that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with SEO, but it just means it gives you peace of mind, and it means your site is always safe. I like WordFence for security. Again, so it doesn't get hacked. In terms of speed, because we all know speed is such an important factor when it comes to SEO, how fast your site loads. I'm a big fan of WP Cache. Any speed plugins that you love?
Yeah, WP Super Cache, and there's WP Minify.
Yes.
So there's also Smush It.
Oh, I love Smush It. Yeah, WP. I think it's mostly they're always called something like WP Smush. They're not very imaginative. But yeah, Smush is fantastic, and I'll include a link to that. What that does is it will squish all your images and make them as small as they can be. You can only do about 5 or 6 images with the free version, so I have upgraded to the paid version of that. And what it does is every time I upload an image, it squishes it and makes it super small, so it's quicker to load. And the Minify plugin that Peter mentions helps minify your JavaScript and CSS files. Here we go, acronym crazy, but it just makes your site run faster. And
in some cases, it can kind of make your site crash, you know.
Yeah.
Because depending on the quality of the theme, if you've purchased a cheap theme, or maybe there's been some coding done on your site that's not quite up to scratch, then you run the Minify plugin and it can make your site crash. So. Yes.
I always recommend backing up your site before you install any plugins, so that if anything does go wrong, you know that it was that plugin that caused the problem, and you can just uninstall it. Also, some plugins don't play well together, so it's really important to look at how many downloads a plugin has had, how many star reviews it has, if the support for that plugin is still active. So some plugins, you'll look at them and you're about to download them, then you see that no one's been supporting that plugin, it hasn't been updated since like 2006 or something crazy, and what that means, it might not work with the most recent version of WordPress, and that can be a big problem as well. WordPress updates itself all the time. There always seems to be a new version. Do you think people should be updating their versions straight away, or do you like to leave it for a couple of weeks to see what happens?
My take on that is, there's always a risk, and there has been cases where we've updated and it has caused issues on the site. I think the best way to think of it is minor versions. So the sort of 4 point dot whatever, those ones are pretty safe because they're just patches. They haven't really updated the full code base. So they're just I think you can safely update those, and really WordPress will just do it without you even knowing, kind of thing. And WordPress is updated and that sort of thing happens. Major versions, it's worth just perhaps if you know someone who's an expert, to ask them, reach out, ask, or perhaps do a little bit of reading about it yourself. But I wouldn't hold off too long, especially if it's a security update. It's worth doing.
If your site goes down for a long period and Google can't index it, or it gets hacked, which happened to me, and lots of weird words appeared in my content, and I started ranking for like weird drugs and stuff. It was very strange, you know. And you know, if your site has issues for a long period, that is obviously going to have an impact on your ability to rank, your ability to get traffic, to convert. So it is an SEO issue. It's just a sort of indirect SEO issue.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so one was just an example of a hack. I mean, I always like talking about them because it's just crazy what the hackers get up to. So one of them was they hacked the site and started pumping out all this content for girls on WhatsApp. How to contact these girls on WhatsApp, and it's just this business website who does glass window repairs in Sydney, you know. And it's like, back to the question, absolutely, update as soon as you possibly can. 99.9 times it's going to be safe. But if you have had some custom coding done on your site, then it's really worth checking with a developer or something like that.
One thing that I always do when I set up a new WordPress site is I go in and I change the permalinks. So as default, WordPress sets your URLs or your links to kind of be page IDs and numbers, which isn't particularly SEO friendly.
One of the first things you could do before you start creating pages, jump straight into the settings, go to the permalinks, and I just think set it the simplest naming you can find, which is usually just, you know, / post name or something along those lines. Sometimes some people, if they've got a lot of content, they might want to include the date in their permalinks because they may have, you know, complicated, or maybe they're pumping out a lot of content and they want the pages to be identifiable, you know, on the URL strings, that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely a big deal. Do that first.
Yeah.
Google loves human readable, and it'll match your keywords and things like that. So
yeah, it's one of the first things I do because it's always a bit of a pain if you're 30 blog posts in and then you remember to do it, because then you've got to set up little redirects for all those ones. So yes, one of the first things I always do. So that's just a little top tip, and I'll include an extra video in the show notes, just giving you a screen capture of how to do that, because it's a tiny thing, but it can make quite a big difference. So just want to touch on Google AMP.
Google has decided that, you know, people aren't having the best experience on their mobile devices. Often the internet connections are slow, or the web pages are loaded down with lots of data, too many, you know, megabytes for the page to load slowly on the mobile. And it's just they're not getting the greatest experience. So Google always loves showing results in their Google results on their web, you know, when you do a search. They love showing good quality pages, and when the page is very slow, you know, perhaps people tend to bounce, and that might reflect on Google. So they've decided to do this thing called AMP, and the idea is that it speeds up the page. It's just like a really cut down version, and there's some code, there's some things you can set up on your site. There's some WordPress plugins, and you can install them. And then you just can verify. You need to go through the steps with Google to get your articles up and running. But at the moment, I think it's really focused more on perhaps news related articles, sites that publish a lot. But basically, you know, you do these AMP pages, they load fast, and that's what people want. They don't want to sit around on a mobile device waiting for pages to load. So Google's pushing this pretty hard. It's definitely worth getting on board.
So yeah, Google AMP, which stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages, I don't think that's going anywhere. I do think it's super important. I've actually installed the WordPress AMP plugin, just simply AMP plugin, on Toon.com. It's working fine. There's a verification tool that you can check to make sure that it's all working fine, and it's one of those things that we will see what happens. But yeah, if you're publishing a lot of content, I also think if you have a recipe site or something like that, it seems to be picking those up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes, but you can see the merit in this, because if it can improve people's user experience, faster pages, then we're all going to want to get on board.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's finish up with mistakes. I love a good mistake. I've made a lot myself. I'm sure you have too. What are some top mistakes that you see WordPress site owners making that are going to have an impact on their SEO?
There's so many things that can go wrong, and really kind of innocent mistakes that we all make. There's some that even seasoned SEO people make. So one of the most common ones is, I think I have to say this, is the tick box in your settings. You go underneath the reading settings. There's a little tick box which says, make this site visible. Lots of people, as they're developing their website, they put the tick on, which stops Google from indexing your website. And then weeks later, they're wondering, why is my site not appearing in Google at all for any search term? And it's because they've put the tick on and told Google not to index the site.
Yeah.
So that happens. It's easy to forget, easy to overlook. But, if, over time, you kind of develop your checklist, your SEO checklist. And one of the items that you check for is to make sure that Google is indexing the site properly. So that's definitely one. What else? Things, I think 404s, broken links. I think what often happens is if you're not really aware about how powerful a URL string is, oftentimes you might go in and just sort of change your web pages. You might think, I might just change the menu around or change my page. I think it's going to be better if I put this word in the URL or something like that. And often what I think people are not aware of is that's causing 404 errors. And when Google crawls your site, it gets errors, which obviously affects your SEO, but more from the point of view that people who are going to your website are probably getting errors. They can't find the pages either, which is a big issue. So
yeah, I think it's a huge issue. And just to explain, a 404 error is another word for page not found. So it's when Google comes to a page and that page isn't there because you've changed the URL, but you haven't done what's called a redirect to redirect that old URL to the new page. And there's lots of plugins you can use. My favorite, I think it's just called 301 redirect, where you can just put in the old URL and the new URL. And that's another thumbs up for making sure you've registered your site on Google Search Console, because it will generate lists of 404 errors for you. And then you can just go in and plug them in to your redirect tool and fix them up. But the idea is you don't want to have them in the first place. People get stressed and think, I've got 404 errors. Am I going to get a penalty? No, you're not. But the more errors you have on the site, the more difficult you make Google's job. It's just common sense that Google wants nice, clean, easy to crawl sites. So I see people doing that a lot. I think that happens a lot as well when people migrate their site. So maybe they change the domain or they move to a new platform, or I don't know, like you said, some people will just add a new sub menu item and it changes 300 URLs, but they don't do anything about it. And then they're like, why have all my pages disappeared? I think that's such a big one, really big one. Well, Peter, we are done. We could talk about WordPress SEO all day, but we have other things to do. We have to go and help other people with their SEO. Peter, thanks so much for being on the show. And I'm sure I'll have you back to talk about SEO soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Kate. It's been great chatting.